Back in time for the next part of class.
Aye.
Alright. So, I want to emphasize this. So many of us were getting lost on numbers 1 and 3 because you know what you were not paying attention to?
Wait, what's 1 and 3?
The keywords in the
Partially the keywords or something else that you're not paying attention to.
what's the
Volume. I mean, the volunteers.
miles per.
The miles, the volunteers, those are called the what?
I forgot what's called.
Units.
Units.
There we go. It's the units. Thank you. Okay, so I don't like to give answers, but man, y'all are struggling with that one. They're called units. You gotta pay attention to your units. Notice, did we want volunteers per mile?
No.
No.
So it didn't make sense to do 8 divided by 2. We wanted.
Miles per volunteer. Yeah, hit me.
Notice when you use your units, how it makes more sense.
Yo.
Also, I saw a whole bunch of us, and I saw this really badly in first block, where we just had a final answer of 1/4.
Yo.
Does 1/4 mean anything?
No.
No. You need the units with it, but also, if you were to use this to help you study for a future quiz or future test, just having even that 1/4 mile per volunteer, is that explaining where you got that from?
I would.
Yeah.
No.
Just having this explains where you got it from?
No.
You gotta have that.
Could you take that extra 5 seconds to write 2 miles divided by 8 volunteers? Will that help you understand this in the future? Yes. Same idea here. 2 miles per 10 volunteers. Okay, cool. That's 1/5 of a mile per volunteer. Also, if you don't do this, it made tackling number 2 much harder. And so we had to get a decimal here, or you could just say 2/25 miles per volunteer. And that's something also, you could do decimals, right? You could just say 0.2 miles per volunteer. What was 2 divided by 25? Was it 0.04?
Huh?
2 divided by
0.08?
Yeah, 0.0.
Okay, so 0.08 miles per volunteer. And so notice if you actually write each of these out, what is in the numerator every time?
2.
The 2, right? Is that going to be a variable?
No.
No. And that's what we want to recognize is it's always a 2, but it's divided by something that's changing. What's a good variable to represent the thing that is changing there? You could use x. What else could you use? YR. I saw multiple variables that I actually really liked.
B.
Okay, it could be M. What was it? Why would V make sense here?
For volunteers.
Because it's volunteers, right? I think some people put N here as well. Why would N make sense? Number of volunteers. Either one is fine. No matter what you wrote there, 2 divided by V, 2 divided by N, 2 divided by X was always equal to what? What is this?
Number of miles.
The number?
Miles per volunteer.
Miles per volunteer. So that would be the length of a road section in miles for each volunteer, which is what variable that it gave you?
L.
L. And you can flip it, right? It could be L equals 2 divided by V. But we want to recognize that all I'm doing is I'm taking each of these things that you already know. Okay, it's 2. I'm dividing by the number of volunteers. Okay, that's equal to my length. That's it. When we move down to number 3, this one's a little bit tougher, right? I saw some people try to do 0.4 divided by 2. Now, I'm even ignoring units right here, but you get 0.2. Is that even a possibility?
No.
Why not?
You can't have 0.2 volunteers.
That's what I'm saying, right? If we're paying attention to our context, that doesn't work. All right, I saw some people trying to do this. Does that work?
No.
No.
You have a decimal.
You can't have a decimal of people. Okay? But I think most of us eventually got to this point where it was equal to 5 volunteers, right? Did 5 volunteers make sense?
Yeah.
Yep. Does anyone know, thinking about our units, why this would actually work?
Can you play with it?
Remember how I said units matter? To what again?
2. You put in 5 volunteers.
To what?
2 miles.
2 miles,
Over 5 volunteers.
but not for number 3. What are we dividing by in number 3?
0.4.
0.4 miles.
Equals 5 volunteers.
Remember, that's not just miles. Even though it says just miles there, that's miles per.
Volunteers. Miles per volunteer.
not using a calculator, just in general, how do you divide by a fraction? You're going to multiply by something.
100.
No.
True. 2 miles. 9. 1.
What did I just do to this fraction? I flipped that fraction, didn't I?
Yo.
There's an R word.
Breathe.
The reciprocal.
The reciprocal.
Ooh,
To divide by a fraction, you're going to multiply by its reciprocal. You don't have to do that in this class very often, but this is important for the units. Because what is miles divided by miles?
Miles.
Mouse squared.
What's 3 divided by 3?
1.
1.
Oh.
What's x divided by x?
8.
Eight.
1.
One. My bad. 1.
I thought we were.
That don't make sense. How can an X, how can a letter become a number?
Well,
Oh, it's always
what is anything divided by itself? 1. Remember, what would I need to multiply by 1 in order to get x? So then x divided by x is equal to 1. Okay, so then if I have miles divided by miles, what is that going to be?
5.
one.
Oh. Okay.
Anything divided by itself is
1.
1.
So me divided by me is 1. 1.
No, that would be 2.
You just said that was 1.
No. U plus u divided by u, that'd be 2u
2U.
divided by u.
U.
U divided by u is 1,
1.
that'd be a 2.
I was a silly killer.
But how you just made a pie out of you? Like, you who? I don't know.
So, notice how the miles cancel? What unit am I left with?
Volunteer.
Volunteers. Yeah, remember that's volunteers in this case.
5 volunteers.
You.
Right?
Yeah.
The units should work out. I don't know how many of y'all are planning on doing this, and it doesn't, I'm just making this point. If you want to know how I made it through engineering, legitimately, it was because I learned how to pay attention to my units. Numbers are never on their own, especially when there's a real-world context. By paying attention to units, you can check to make sure it's working out the right way, because I should only be left with volunteers. Notice if I actually did 2 miles times 0.4 miles per volunteer, what's miles times miles? Not dividing, multiplying.
Miles times what?
What's x times x?
8.
X squared,
Yo.
right? Y times y?
Y squared.
So then what's going to be miles times miles?
Mouse squared.
Yeah, do those units make sense? Miles squared per volunteer? Not if I'm looking for the number of volunteers. Pay attention to your units. And so what you ended up finding out, if you work through all of these, is that if you take 2 and you divide it by your length of road per volunteer,
It equals 1.
it equals the number of volunteers.
Hey, I did that. Then that was our equation. I'm gonna go to ass.
All right.
What?
Do we have any questions at this point? We good?
Yep.
So please note, these equations look different, but are they telling the same story?
No, I mean, yes. I keep telling you.
I mean, the same variables, right? Same number. They look different, 2 divided by L versus 2 divided by V, but they're telling the same story. We all good with that? Any questions?
No.
Okay. Notice in the way that we wrote this equation, we played around with things that we knew to make sure it worked out well. All right? We're going to take